computer science education to our kids. The business community was more than willing to be a part of providing funding for training for our teachers, as well as, providing funding to incentivize our teachers to go into computer science. So it was, they came forward, they stepped up and said, we would love to be a part of helping fund the computer technology education.
Well, I appreciate that. The reason I'm asking is because I want to make sure that we're holding them accountable to using the private dollars. Second, I want to make sure we're leveraging federal dollars too as well. I'm hoping that, and I'll talk to Senator McDonald because there's the CHIPS Act. We put in some funding there this last year to make sure we're getting funding out to community colleges for training our next generation of workers. And I'm wondering if there's any of those funds can be utilized to invest in computer science education because it's necessary. I know Senator Dungan's not here. I will talk with him about this between General and Select for two reasons. One, I want to make sure that the Special Education Teacher Forgivable Loan Program Act, the criticism that I had with the Biden administration specific to the loan program is that it wasn't targeting the forgivable loans low-income earners. And reading this, there isn't a target to low-income individuals, which means that there can be somebody that is upper middle class receiving this forgivable loan. And I want to make sure that these institutions, our state institutions, are targeting them to the highest need individuals, both retaining and attracting people into these high need areas of special education, but also making sure we're giving it to the people that really can't afford it, because that's what should be targeting. So I'll work with Senator Dungan on that between General and Select. But overall, I do support the legislation. Did have this conversation with Senator Clements or Chairman Clements. We're moving it forward. Happy to do that. We'll look at the cost. We have to figure out how to find about $20 million for this. Looking at different programs, Education Future Fund has some funding. We'll have to look at other different places as well. But overall, I do want to thank Senator Walz for her work and the leadership of the Education Committee. And we'll talk to Senator Dungan's office about trying to make sure more of these dollars are going out to the highest need individuals, specific to the Special Education Teacher Forgivable Loan Program Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Vargas and Senator Walz. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I listened to the conversation, I listened to Senator Walz address the rest of the amendments on her priority bill. I guess I was waiting to see or hear what their attitude was going to be on how they try and define the funding. So if you look on your green sheet, you go to the second page, third page, there's an opportunity for you to review what we've done up until now. And if you look on the third page, it says bills with general fund impact. And in general file, there's 16 million. And if you go down to select file, these bills are an ENR initial, there's 30 million. So we have already advanced bills to far exceed the money that we have. The other issue that has not been addressed or spoken to is I am very confident that Senator Arch had been putting the brakes on doing 10 bills in one. I know that for a fact. I just asked him. So it's very similar to what we did last year when we got to the end of the session. We put 30, 31, 32 bills in one bill. And what happens when we put 10 bills together in one bill? None of the 10 bills get the discussion or the scrutiny or the dialogue or conversation about what they do. And that's exactly what happens when you do that, and that's what's happening with these bills. So I would be interested in hearing Senator Walz and those who have bills in this Christmas tree to share with me what they think the funding source will be besides general funds. I'm waiting to hear that, because when we get down to the end, all those bills that have a fiscal impact on the budget, on the funds, will have to be discussed, and we'll have to make decisions on how we go forward handling those and which get funded and which do not. And so add this, if this bill advances to select, you add this to the 30 million that we've already designated in the bills that have gotten that far. Now we're going to exceed, we'll be right at 51 million. That's a pretty significant lift considering we only started with 23. So I'll be interested to hear what Senator Walz comes up with in her next time she speaks, or anyone else who has a bill in this collage, and see what their attitude is about going forward, how we do funding. So we'll wait and see what they say. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Walsh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to, I will speak to Senator Erdman's concerns in just a minute, but I also want to be able to have time to talk about Senator Dungan's bill, which is LB 964, adopt the Special Education Teacher Forgivable Loan Program Act, and provide for scholarships under the Nebraska Career Scholarship Act. The Special Education Teacher Forgivable Loan Act will be administered through the Nebraska Department of Education to assist up to 25 individuals enrolled at a state college in Nebraska or the University of Nebraska to become special education teachers by supporting forgivable loans to individuals who commit to teaching in Nebraska following their certification as a teacher with special education endorsement. LB 964 is a pilot program that limits the number of forgivable loans to 25 per state institution. Once they receive their degree in education, they have 1 year to find employment at an elementary or high school here in Nebraska. They will then have their loans through the department forgiven over 5 years or the equivalent number of years loans taken out. This bill allows the department to use its judgment when offering deferments. This is the case when this is in the case that somebody is severely injured and can no longer work, or maybe they have an ailing family member they need to take care of for an extended period of time. LB 964 provides a path for people who want to be teachers and become special education teachers. For a relatively small fiscal impact, we can make a difference in education. And I know that Senator Vargas had talked briefly about some questions that he had with Senator Dungan, and he's going to follow up on them. To answer Senator Erdman's, I do know your name, Senator Erdman's question. As you know, when we put together our legislation or create our legislation, we don't know what the budget looks like. We will absolutely work with Senator Clements on the fiscal note and figure out how we can reduce that fiscal note. My part is only one part of the bill, and I don't want to speak for the other senators, but I know that they're willing to do the same thing. The funding for computer science does not go, I just want to make sure that you know this, it does not go directly to the schools. We have a real issue, especially in rural Nebraska, with teachers who have computer science technology endorsements or certifications. They're just very few. So what we're trying to do is address that issue. We're trying to address the issue of being able to train our teachers so they have those certifications and they can fulfill the education requirement that Senator McKinney had put into place a couple years ago. We're trying to make this a better process, a better, more effective program. The funding, again, will not go directly to the schools, but it will go to NDE to be able to disperse out funds and provide training to teachers and incentives to teachers. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, again, we are absolutely willing to work with Senator Clements. I think that there may be a possibility that we could use funds from the Education Trust Fund. It is an education trust fund, And, you know, that would make sense to me. So I'm hoping that we
minute.
can pass this through, on to select. And in the meantime, we will work with Senator Clements and others to address the fiscal note. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Waltz. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak, and this is your third time.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Senator Walls, I appreciate that you've tried to address my issues. You've totally missed why I am opposed to doing these things you want to do. I'm not opposed to what you're doing. I'm not opposed to where the funds go. What I'm opposed to is where the funds come from. That's the opposition for me. We worked in appropriations diligently, trying to figure out how much money we could possibly bring to the floor so people would be able to fund the things that they want to fund. As I said in my last time on the mic, this would exceed $50 million in requests for the $23 million that we have for the floor. So I'm not taking issue to the dyslexia bill. I'm not taking issue to your bill or anything about where the money goes. You didn't hear me say I'm concerned about where the money goes. I'm concerned about where the money's coming from. So I had put in a motion to bracket this to make it, we go to 33 to move forward, but I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to tell you is this: unless you figure out a way to fund these 10 bills other than general fund, I will bracket this when we get to select, because we're not going to go and put ourselves in a position that we have $100 million worth of requests on $23 million worth of money. A couple of years ago in appropriations, we had $2.5 billion to distribute. We had requests for $4 billion to distribute. That was a difficult time for us. Difficult to make a decision who gets the money, who doesn't. And so I don't know whether you've understood where I'm coming from or what I'm trying to say, but I just hope that you didn't miss it. I'm not opposed to doing these things, but I'm opposed to where the money comes from. So I'm not going to drop the bracket motion in today, because we were here till 10 last night and I don't want to be here past 2 today. But I am still disappointed, and you can't fix this, but I'm still disappointed that the committee brought 10 bills in one. That was against the desire of the speaker, what he had said, no more than 5 or 6 bills. Everybody knew that. The other issue is, you knew, all of us should have known, that a long time ago, the Appropriations Committee, Senator Clements, had told the body, we have $23 million for the floor. So I don't take lightly that you say you didn't know what the money was going to be when you brought these bills, because you surely had to know. You had to know that Senator Clements had stood up and said, we have $23 million, and this is the majority of the money that the $23 million would be. So those are my issues. That is what I'm concerned about, and I seem to be the only one that's concerned about that. But I can tell you right now, in appropriations, we work long and hard trying to figure out what we can fund and what we can afford to fund. And then we come here and people want to do and spend 3 times more money than we currently have. So for the sake of time and being collegial, I'm not going to bracket your bill, but I surely will when we get to general file if you haven't figured out some other source of revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Albright, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. My apologies for being off the floor for most of the morning. We were in exec and revenue. But I serve on the Education Committee, and I did vote this out. I vote a lot of things out when they are a priority bill for someone or the committee. But that does not mean that I agree with everything that was put into the package. But what the way I want to kind of structure this is that I sat on the governor's committee all summer long and into the fall to try to figure out property tax relief for our state. And we're asking cities and counties to pull back. You know, you're going to get a cap plus growth plus, you know, a few other things. I won't reveal what we're going to be doing just yet because we all have to vote on it. But the whole thing is about spending. And if we're asking them, the cities and the counties and other taxing authorities to, you know, button up, and the governor was out scrubbing all of the different agencies of funding that has been there, sitting there for a number of years, to put it back in the coffers of the state so that we can help to reduce the property taxes. But when there's so much money to be brought to the floor, even in the Revenue Committee, we had people asking for $37 million for a particular project that was reduced to $1.2 million. If it gets off the ground and if it's a great program, then yes, future legislators should add to that. I had a bill that we've had for 2 years now that we've approved when Governor Ricketts was in, but we've never yet funded it. It's a program for the farming industry. But I went to Senator Clements and I said, do you think I can get $2 million put in there? Can I get $500,000 put in there? No. And when he stands up as our appropriations chair, and those who serve on the appropriations fully understand this, that you don't always get what you want. And maybe now is not the time. But when we keep bringing this stuff in the next 10 days, I mean, boom, there's going to be a lot of things that are cut. I have in my district, I mean, it's been an ask. Senator Hansen carried it, where they need a new water tower put up, $10 million. They were asking of the state. But if the money's not there, it's just not there, and we have to wait till next year. But if everybody, you know, has already front-loaded what they want and it's already on the green sheet, and I don't know if everything that's on the green sheet's still going to go forward, we have to be prudent with our dollars as well. So the fiscal note on this is really my problem with the bill. And maybe it isn't the time now. It's just like anything else. You know, I was here for 8 years. It can always wait till the next round. So I would just implore you that if this is a $10 or $20 million fiscal note, you need to be thinking about how we can help in doing the right thing. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Albright. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to be voting no on AM 3061. As I've been looking at this, the LB 1284 is the only bill that has been designated as a senator priority. The other 9 bills, none of them were a senator priority. And I think that's why they were being put on here, because they didn't have a priority, and this gets them to the floor on top of, tagging on with a priority bill. And I think the introducer of 1284 may find out it's going to be a real negative thing to have another $19.5 million of spending added on to that bill. And again, I do agree with what Senator Erdman said. We already have about $46 million in requests of general funds from, if you look at the backside of the green sheet, bills that are on select, file, or final reading. And this is, by my calculations, another $20.5 million would put us to 66 million plus other bills that we haven't seen yet. And there's, in my opinion, a maximum of 20 million of funds available. So there's going to have to be reductions made in order to keep the budget sustainable. And it is the priority bill comment is something we see in a reason I think we see in appropriations 59 bills this year, because if they can get into the budget bill, the budget is a priority bill, and people bring us bills for appropriation requests because it'll become a priority if it gets into the budget bill. And that's similar to what's going on here with 10 bills in one. So I think there are probably some individual good programs in here. I see there are 3 that have 0 fiscal notes. And I'm just having to tell you that there isn't going to be room for all of these expenses. And when we get to the end, we'll see how the priorities work out. So I've read on 3061. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Merman, you're recognized to close on the committee amendment AM 3061.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. When we put together this package, we did realize that the fiscal note was higher than we had hoped. And I do appreciate everyone that worked together on the Education Committee to put together this package, including the senators on the committee and staff. We want to, of course, the goal of the committee is to support especially those students that are considering going into the education field, and also students that are student teaching right now. And also, as they start their careers, teachers are, their wage compared to other wages right now in our economy are not as competitive as we'd like to see them. So that is the reasoning behind having a lot of these bills in this package. Also, of course, the concern about reading. It's very important, of course. I'm sure it's been talked about on the floor. And again, I've got to apologize too. I've been in Revenue Committee most of the morning, so missed a lot of the discussion. But reading, once a student gets behind in second grade or so, second, third grade, if they're behind then in learning reading, it's really difficult to catch up after that time. So that's why we have a bill in there that really emphasizes funding reading, the way that we teach reading. So I realize that this bill will be probably trimmed down some on select, but there's a lot of good bills in here, and I appreciate your support on both the amendment and the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Merman. Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of AM 3061. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. There has been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, record.
26 ayes, 5 nays to put the House under call, Mr. President.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Koff, please record your presence. Senator McDonald, Senator Van Giller, and the House is under call. Please return to the chamber. All unexcused members are now present. Senator Merman, there was a vote open. Will you accept call-ins? We are now accepting call-ins.
Senator
Mr. Clerk?
Linehan. Senator Linehan voting yes. Senator Dover voting no. Senator McDonald voting yes.
Okay.
There has been a request for a roll call vote. Reverse order. Mr. Clerk?
Senator Wishart. Senator Wayne
Voting yes. Senator Wishart.
voting yes. Senator Walls voting yes. Senator Van Gilleren voting yes. Senator Vargas voting yes. Senator Slama voting yes. Senator Sanders voting yes. Senator Reapy voting no. Senator Raybold voting yes. Senator Merman voting yes. Senator Mosier voting no. Senator Meyer voting yes. Senator McKinney voting yes. Senator McDonald voting yes. Senator Lowe voting no. Senator Lippincott voting no. Senator Linehan voting yes. Senator Kauth voting no. Senator Jacobson voting no. Senator Ibach voting no. Senator Hunt voting yes. Senator Hughes. Senator Holdcroft voting no. Senator Hardin voting no. Senator Hansen voting yes. Senator Halloran voting no. Senator Frederickson voting yes. Senator Erdman voting no. Senator Dungan. Senator Dover voting no. Senator Dorn voting yes. Senator DeKay. Senator DeBoer voting yes. Senator Day. Senator Conrad voting yes. Senator Clements voting no. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh
Yes.
voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Senator Brewer voting no. Senator Brandt voting yes. Senator Bosselman voting no. Senator Bostar voting yes. Senator Bozen voting no. Senator Blood voting yes. Senator Ballard voting yes. Senator Armendariz voting no. Senator Arch voting yes. Senator Albright voting no. Senator Aguilar 25 ayes, 18 nays on the adoption of the committee amendments.
AM 3061 is adopted. I raise a call. Senator Waltz, you're recognized to close on LB 1284.
Pledge to work with everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Again, I just want to thank everybody for listening and being engaged in this really important conversation. This is a very thoughtful piece of legislation. We worked hard in the committee, as a whole. We discussed these bills. We as a committee voted these bills out 8-0. We understand the educational needs to support our future workforce. And again, we will work hard to address the fiscal note, as well as finding other possible funding sources to make sure that we can provide the educational training to our kids that they deserve. And with that, I would appreciate a green vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of LB 1284 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all of you voted that care too? Mr. Clerk, record.
28 ayes, 10 nays on the advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
LB 1284 is advanced. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, I have a series of amendments to LB 25, to LB 934 by Senator Boson. Mr. President, I have a new A bill, Legislative Bill 262A by Senator Halloran. It's a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of LB 262. That's it. I have a notice committee hearing from the from the General Affairs Committee, a notice of committee hearing from the Transportation and Telecommunications hearing. And Mr. President, the bills read on final reading this morning were presented to the governor at 10:59 a.m. That's all I have.
Mr. Clerk, for the next item on the agenda.
Next item, Mr. President, is Legislative Bill 934, introduced by Senator Boson. It's a bill for an act relating to consumer protection to amend sections 591608.01, 591611, 591623, 87303.02, and 87306 revised reissued statutes of Nebraska to change provisions relating to venue for actions under the Consumer Protection Act, to change enforcement and investigative powers of the Attorney General for violations of such act, and Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act, to provide for jury trials, to harmonize provisions, to provide for severability, and to repeal the original sections. The bill was first read on January 4th of this year. The bill was referred to the Committee on Judiciary. The committee reports the bill back to general file. There are committee amendments.
Senator Boson, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 934 was introduced at the request of the Attorney General. It will provide the Attorney General with additional tools to best protect Nebraska consumers and prioritize restitution for victims. Section 1 amends the Consumer Protection Act and provides the Attorney General with the choice of venue to bring an action in the name of the state to enforce the Consumer Protection Act. This would add to the existing options the ability to bring such action in the district court of a county in which the Attorney General brings a related claim arising under the Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act. It also adds express authority for the Attorney General to bring a claim for a trial by jury, and also allows a defendant to request a trial by jury. Cases brought under, so there's two acts here. One is the Consumer Protection Act and one is UDIPTA, which stands for Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act, for unfair or deceptive trade practices that are necessarily fact-intensive. Section 2 harmonizes the Consumer Protection Act with both existing and new authorities of the Attorney General as it relates to restitution. Victim restitution should be a primary objective of Nebraska's consumer protection laws. This section allows, per an order of the district court, the ability to temporarily freeze any financial accounts or impound any money connected with a Consumer Protection Act violation for a period of time until the proceedings have concluded. This allows them to temporarily freeze rather than just impound in order to better ensure that defendants do not abscond with or expend the money they received from victims for their unlawful practices, better ensuring the prospect of restitution for victims. Again, victim restitution should be a primary objective of Nebraska's consumer protection laws. Section 3 is a cleanup section, and Section 4 amends existing authorities, allows them to issue civil investigative demands. Section 5 adds a new section to the UDIPTA, so the other side of the to the other side of the Consumer Protection Act under UDIPTA, which stands for Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act, to provide for them to also bring the claim, defendants to also bring a claim for a trial by jury. I've done 2 handouts here, both of which were newspaper articles, one entitled Northeast Nebraska Couple Warning of Phony Equipment Sales Scam, which is an article dated January 30th of this year, and also an article titled Nebraska AG, Seller of Fraudulent Husker Ticket Package for Charity Used Proceeds for Disneyland Tickets. These are stories where Nebraskans have been victims of unfair or deceptive trade practices and have lost their hard-earned money to these businesses. This bill will allow Nebraskans the best opportunity to be able to get their money back. Unfortunately, we are hearing more and more stories about victims of these scams and the unfair or deceptive trade practices. I'm asking you to help give Nebraskans hope when they fall victim to these circumstances. There is a committee amendment which makes a few changes to the bill, and Senator Wayne will be introducing that amendment, and I'm happy to answer any questions should you have them. I urge you to vote green on Legislative Bill 934 and the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bosson. As the clerk mentioned, there is a committee amendment. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to open.
Okay, that's the wrong opening. This is the right opening. Thank you, Mr. President. LB 934 makes changes to the Consumer Protection Act that Senator Bosson already, and the Uniform Deceptive Trade Practice Act that Bosson already laid out. The original bill allows for the Attorney General to request a jury trial for claims brought under either act. AM 2706 allows both the Attorney General and the named defendant to request a jury trial for the claims brought under the act. The original bill allows the Attorney General to take various actions like freezing and impounding certain assets and records when there is a cause to believe that it violated the Consumer Protection Act. AM 2706 would require reasonable cause before the Attorney General can take such action. So we're trying to put a standard in this to make sure that assets aren't just being frozen. The amendment also clarifies that a court order impounding or freezing assets must be for connected accounts and defines what connected accounts are. Finally, AM 2706 creates a process for the Attorney General to seek an ex parte order that temporarily freezes impounded connected accounts. This order is only effective for 14 days, and the defendant must be provided notice and an opportunity for a hearing. I would ask you to vote green on 2706. This is an amendment that clarifies and makes improvements to the bill and makes some of the changes that were addressed by the committee in the committee process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator DeBoer, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment is an amendment that I worked on with Senator Bosson and with Attorney General Hilgers and his staff to address some of the concerns that I and others had in the committee hearing. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of those folks who helped me to work on this amendment and for all their grace in doing that. I think this makes a very strong bill now, and I am very pleased with where we all landed. I think there's a lot of guardrails and also gives the Attorney General the ability to do the things that he needs to do to keep Nebraskans safe, or their assets safe, when they are subject to some of these kinds of crimes or these kinds of bad actions, I would say. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator Koff would like to recognize 11 students, 9th through 12th grade from Millard West High School, Millard, Nebraska. They are seated in the north balcony. Please stand and be recognized by your Nebraska State Legislature. Mr. Clerk, for amendments.
Mr. President, Senator Armendariz would move to amend the committee amendment with AM 3050.
Senator Armendariz, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amendment 3050 is actually a bill that it was 1096, and it is legislation to combat child exploitation and human trafficking online. LB 1096, now AM 3050, continues efforts of the Attorney General to strengthen Nebraska statute to better protect potential victims of sex trafficking and sexual assault, particularly children. AM 3050 allows protections beyond the geographic limits of current criminal jurisdiction to reach the world's most prolific purveyors of exploitation of children and sex trafficking victims. AM 3050 allows the Attorney General to utilize existing authority under the Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act to issue civil investigative demands to potentially gain substantial discovery as to the extent of material exploitative of children or depicting victims of sexual assault or sex trafficking on some of the most frequented websites on the internet. The UDIPTA allows for the potential recovery of up to $4,000 per violation and significant injunctive relief. I ask for your green vote on AM 3050. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Armendariz. Senator Boston, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make sure, I meant to talk about Senator Armendariz's amendment and I forgot. AM 2706, the judiciary amendment, is what I worked on with Senator DeBoer. Friendly amendment, please greenlight that. AM 3050, I also worked on with Senator Armendariz. Friendly amendment, please greenlight both of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Boston. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Armendariz, you're recognized to close. Senator Armendariz waves. Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of AM 3050. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
33 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment.
AM 3050 is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Wayne, you're recognized to close on AM 2706. Senator Wayne waves. Colleagues, the question before the body is the adoption of 2706. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
33 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the committee amendment, Mr. President.
AM 2706 is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Boston, you're recognized to close on the advancement of LB 934. Senator Boston waves. Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement to ENR initial of LB 934. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of LB 934, Mr. President.
LB 934 is advanced. Mr. Clerk, for next item.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 1023, introduced by Senator Von Gillerin. It's a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation to amend Section 772701 and 772716 revised reissued statutes to allow income tax deductions for the cost of certain property and for certain research or experimental expenditures as prescribed, to harmonize provisions and to repeal the original sections. The bill was read on January 5th of this year. It was referred to the Committee on Revenue. The committee reports the bill to general file. There are amendments.
Senator Von Gillerin, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Nebraskans and colleagues. I present to you today my priority bill, LB 1023, which deals with the expensing of machinery and equipment, as well as the expensing of research and experimentation investments. LB 1023 is an improved update from a bill I worked on last year and now includes language that benefits cooperative associations. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 temporarily eliminated the factory tax. While this was a very pro-growth change, those eliminations have now expired. The factory tax allowed for full expensing and immediate cost recovery when filing federal tax returns for business property with an asset life of 20 years or less. The assets covered by the federal changes include machinery and equipment, but also include assets such as new roofs, heating systems, and computer software. On January 1 of 2023, the ability to fully expense went away, effectively raising taxes on these investments and disincentivizing upgrades and future investments in Nebraska. Under provisions in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, the innovation tax on research and experimentation had also been made fully and immediately deductible. This also ended on January 1, 2022, and now these costs must be amortized over a 5-year period. Innovation is a critical component of both our national and global competitiveness, and particularly in Nebraska's thriving agriculture-based economy. Nebraska should welcome and encourage businesses looking to bring new ideas to the forefront. 1023 decouples Nebraska from these two provisions of the federal tax code and allows for full expensing, freeing up dollars to be reinvested in businesses, increase hiring, or to fund expansions. All good things for Nebraska's economy. I know that this is effective for growing business and putting people to work because I used it in my past business life. There were several years where we utilized the accelerated depreciation and pumped a substantial amount of capital back into the local economy through the purchase of new trucks and equipment. We purchased locally, we paid sales tax on the purchases, paid licensing and DMV taxes and fees, all of which more than offset any tax reduction. In turn, the businesses that we purchased from presumably did the same things with their increased revenue and possibly even increased their hiring. Successful businesses don't sit on capital, they reinvest it. I've run some rough numbers and find that those dollars only have to turn over several times in the local economy to offset the decrease in corporate tax revenue. Certainly, they'll have a greater turnover and greater impact than that. There was some traction at the federal level to make this immediate expensing permanent. However, that is stalled in the House and does not appear that the Senate will take any action. We need to move forward to secure this tool for businesses in our state, regardless of whether the feds do so or not. This is a good economic advancement bill and will benefit companies and their employees. Great Nebraska companies like Valmont, Lindsay, Nucor, Kawasaki, and many others who employ thousands of hardworking Nebraskans. The chief industries and software developer DMSI, who sent in letters of support. In addition, representatives from the ethanol, biofuel, and bioscience industries testified that LB 1023 will help their businesses and their employees. Just as a reminder, this simply accelerates an existing tax deduction for depreciation expense. It's not a new deduction, nor is it to be confused with a tax credit. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce this legislation. Making Nebraska more business-friendly will help both keep existing jobs and create new jobs. And I ask for your green vote on LB 1023.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillerin. As the clerk stated, there are committee amendments. Senator Linehan, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 3034 to LB 1023 combines bills into one tax incentive package that provides tax incentives in many different areas to help build Nebraska and the economy in Nebraska. So Senator Von Gillerin's already talked about his bill. I don't know if senators on the floor, they've got bills in here. Senator Bostar has LB 173. Which was amended, creates an exemption to individuals from out of state coming to Nebraska for a conference meeting or training in the state for employees and directors of a corporation attending such for no more than 7 days and earning no more than $5,000. So what this is doing right now, the law in Nebraska, of which many people I expect don't follow, you come to Nebraska for 1 day, you work in Nebraska for 1 day, you owe Nebraska income taxes. So say I'm coming to ABC Corporation in Lincoln, and I'm here for 3 days of training. The way our laws are written right now, I owe Nebraska income tax for those 3 days. Now, many ignore this, but some companies have accountants who are very particular, and they're not ignoring it, so it's a problem. So we're having an exemption. You can be here for 7 days without owing Nebraska taxes. Okay, and then Senator Kauth, I don't know if she can say if she wants to speak to her amendment. Yes, so Senator Kauth, can I ask Senator Kauth a question, please?
Senator Kauth, will you yield to a question?
Yes, I will.
Senator Kauth, would you please explain what LB 416 does?
LB 416 is a complement to LB 173. It allows people who are employed by companies here in the state but live outside of the state for their own convenience to be able to come back and visit and work in their home offices for up to 7 days without having to pay Nebraska taxes.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Senator Meyer also has LB 1113 as a business equipment exemption for equipment used primarily to capture and removal of carbon dioxide from personal property tax under the Nebraska Imagine Act. Senator Bostar, would Senator Bostar yield to a question?
Will Senator Bostar yield to a question?
Yes, I would.
Senator Bostar, could you please explain what LB 1049 will accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. So LB 1049 is legislation to lower the cap on occupation taxes imposed by municipalities on wireless services from 6.25% to 4%. According to the 2023 Tax Foundation report on excise fees and wireless services released last November, Nebraska has the second highest disparity between wireless tax and fee rates and general sales tax rates in the nation, right behind the state of Illinois. And in 2023, our wireless tax and fee rates averaged 12.92% higher than our average combined state and local tax rates. So just for clarity, the LB 1049 provisions would provide tax relief in the following Nebraska communities: Bellevue, Gretna, Kearney, Omaha, Lincoln, Beatrice, Bennett, Chadron, Columbus, Crete, Emerson, Fairbury, Grand Island, Hastings, La Vista, Lexington, Nebraska City, Ogallala, Papillion, Plattsmouth, Schuyler, Wahoo, Waterloo, Waverly, Wayne, and York.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. And as always, Senator Ballard is ready to explain LB 1400.
Senator Ballard,
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Senator Ballard, would you yield a question?
Yes.
Senator Ballard, would you like to explain, please, LB 1400?
Yes, thank you, Senator Linehan. LB 1400 would provide a tax incentive to business employees for relocation expenses and for employees coming to Nebraska who make between $70,000 and $250,000 a year, increasing each year by the same percentage used to increase the income tax bracket. It would allow employers to receive a 50% tax credit for any relocation expenses they pay to bringing the employees to Nebraska, with a $50,000 credit limit per employee. The employee gets a one-time tax deduction. They're allowed to exclude Nebraska wages income for 2 years moving to the state. The employee must remain in Nebraska for 2 years to claim their credit. Otherwise, it shall be recaptured by the department. And additionally, the committee amendment also caps the tax credit at $5 million.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. And did you bring this at the request of Governor Pillen?
I did, yes.
Thank you. So as you can see, we've included a broad group of incentives to help address a number of concerns within the state, including providing assistance to grow our workforce in the state, which is a great need right now. I would also mention, and I should have been here for the last discussion in the last bill, I understand that we're going to pass bills on general. They're going to have to be looked at on select, and we're going to have to look at fiscal notes. In the end, everybody's going to have to give up a little. But I also want to mention, there is a mistake we made last year in a bill that will bring some money to the floor, not a lot, but enough that it could help get some other things passed. And it was a mistake, and we passed it because of a drafting error. So that will be coming. So I wouldn't concern myself too much with the current fiscal notes because they're all going to change when we get past general. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Linehan, Senator Armendariz, Senator Bostar, Senator Ballard. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Linehan, you're recognized to close on LB 3034. Colleagues, Senator Linehan waives closing. Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of AM 3034. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
35 ayes, no nays on the adoption of AM 3034, Mr. President.
AM 3034 is adopted. Mr. Clerk, for items.
Mr. President, I have an amendment, AM 2150 to LB 1023 by Senator Von Gillern.
Senator Von Gillern, you're recognized to open.
2150 I actually addressed in my opening statement. That was the change for the to add the cooperatives to the bill. So with that, I would again ask for your green vote on 2150 and then 1023.
Thank you, Senator Von Gillen. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Von Gillen, you're recognized to close. Senator Von Gillen waves. Colleagues, the question before the body is the adoption of AM 2150. All those in favor vote yes. All those opposed vote no. Have you all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
37 ayes, no nays on the adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
AM 2150 is adopted. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Von Gillen, you are recognized to close on LB 1023. Senator Von Gillen waves. Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of LB 1023. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Have you all voted that care to? Mr. Clerk, record.
35 ayes, no nays on the advancement of the bill, Mr. President.
LB 1023 is advanced to our initial. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, turning to the agenda, Legislative Bill 1370 on general file, introduced by Senator Bostelman. It's a bill for an act relating to public power. It defines terms, requires an electric supplier to replace a retired dispatchable electric generator facility as prescribed. The bill was read for the first time on January 17th of this year and referred to the Natural Resources Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Bosselman, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, colleagues. LB 1370 is the Natural Resources Committee's second priority bill. The bill is amended by a white copy amendment that was worked out with our public power companies. The bill creates a review process between the Power Review Board and a utility when the utility decides to decommission or close a dispatchable electric generation facility in excess of 100 megawatts. It also defines dispatchable generation that includes flexibility for future technologies and generation. I will explain more later. First, let me explain why this is important. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, the Midwest Reliability Organization, MRO, and the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, have identified as a serious issue of retiring dispatchable or on-demand electrical generation at a rate that is unsustainable and the need to ensure dispatchable generation exists to meet current and future demand. The NERC's 2023 winter and summer reliability assessments, SPP was placed in an elevated risk category, with NERC finding that, and I quote, the anticipated reserve margin of 38.8% is over 30% lower than last winter, driven by a higher forecasted peak demand and less resource capacity, end quote. SPP specifically had a shortfall of 8,500 megawatts. Even more concerning was NERC's long-term reliability assessment released last December, which includes projections for 2024 through 2033. NERC indicated that our neighboring regional transmission organization, MISO, was projected to have a 4.7 gigawatt shortfall if the expected generator retirements occur. NERC's report also indicated that SPP's surplus capacity will fall sharply sharply over the next 5 years, driven mainly through generation retirements. Just this January, during the extreme cold weather event, Winter Storm Gary, SPP's grid condition entered into the Conservative Operations Advisory category. This is just one step away from SPP's Energy Emergency Alert Level 1, which is declared when all available resources have been committed and SPP is at risk of not meeting requiring operating reserves. On January 18th, the chairman of FERC, Willie Phillips, stated on the record during their January open meeting that SPP had to import a record 6.8 gigawatts of electricity from neighboring states. Remember, MISO is projected to be 4.7 gigawatt shortfall in the near future. LB 1370 as amended is a step in the right direction to approach the concerns NERC, FERC, MRO, and SPP have been warning us about for years. The bill creates a requirement for when public power district, public power and irrigation district, electric membership association, electric cooperative company, or municipality decides to decommission or close a dispatchable electric generation facility in excess of 100 megawatts. They must first provide a written notice to the Power Review Board on their intent to close or decommission the facility. Then, within 60 days, the board, in its discretion, may set a time and place for a closed hearing for the entity wanting to decommission the dispatchable facility to explain to the board their reasoning as to why it should be decommissioned. Following the hearing, the board will provide the entity in writing recommendations. That's recommendations whether decommissioning the facility is in the best interest of that entity and the entity's customers. The entity will then consider the recommendations before making a final decision on whether to decommission the facility. The bill does not apply to any previously announced closures of a dispatchable generation facility. I want to thank Public Power, who was willing to work with me when coming to an agreement on this language. The committee adopted the white copy amendment to LB 1370 with an 8-0 vote. Mr. President, I'd like to now move to the committee amendment.
Senator Bossman, you are welcome to open on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AM 2863 is a committee amendment for LB 1370, which also includes the provisions of LB 956 introduced by Senator Bostar, LB 969 introduced by Senator Kay, LB 1260 introduced by Senator Jacobson, and my bill, LB 120, as amended. I will provide a brief introduction to each bill and then ask each senator to provide additional information regarding their bill after this introduction. LB 956 from Senator Bostar requires FAA approval light mitigation technology be installed on wind turbines. This technology is used to reduce light pollution emitted from wind turbines. LB 969 from Senator Kay increases the minimum dollar thresholds that require advertisement for sealed bids prior to contracting for project development by a public power district or public power and irrigation district. LB 1260 from Senator Jacobson allows for board members of a public power and irrigation districts who are irrigators or leaseholders to discuss and vote on a limited basis on contracts in which they have financial interest. Finally, LB 120, which is my bill, was the result of work with both MPPD and OPPD to come to an agreement on the language of the amended bill. Specifically, LB 120 requires before an electric supplier, public or private, begins construction of any electric generation facility, transmission lines, or related facilities within 10 miles of a military installation defined as a military base, other than a National Guard base or fixed-wing aircraft or strategic weapon assets are on a permanent or temporary basis assigned, stored, operated, or otherwise located. The owner must provide a notice to the Power Review Board certifying that the electric generation facility, transmission lines, and related facilities contains no electronics, materials, or any other components manufactured by a foreign government or foreign non-government person determined to be a foreign adversary pursuant to 15 CFR 7.4. Entities who sell electricity at retail are exempt from these requirements as long as they certify to the Power Review Board that they are in compliance with any North American Electric Reliability Corporation critical infrastructure protection requirements. Over the past few years, there has been a growing national security and cybersecurity concern involving electric generation facilities containing technology that was manufactured in China. In March of 2023, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee held a hearing with members of the Department of Energy and the private sector testifying that the unknown amount of Chinese-made grid equipment poses a risk to the energy sector and national security. Poses a risk to the energy sector and national security. Senator Angus King of Maine echoed those thoughts by saying, and I quote, "I think determining the Chinese origin of crucial parts of the electric system is a hair-on-fire urgent matter. That is an enormous opportunity for malicious activity," end quote. Just last year, the legislature passed Senator Bostar's LB 63, which required communication providers to annually certify to the PSC that their equipment contained no equipment that posed a threat to the national security, and restricted grant funding to communications providers who have not replaced technology. Likewise, we should institute similar protections for our electric grid. I would also like to speak to Senator Kay's bill, since he is off the floor right now. LB 1370, and would just, let's see, I'd like to touch briefly on LB 969, which is an LB 1370, which was heard February 7th of this year and amended into AM 2863 with an 8-0 vote. The LB 969 would increase the dollar threshold for the advertisement of sealed bids for public power districts. These thresholds were last updated in 2009 with supply chain shortages and inflation. We are now at a point where power districts are now having to get sealed bids for simple routine items such as transformers, and in addition to multi-month wait times to actually get the items due to order backlogs. Currently in the district with a gross revenue of less than $500 million, such as Norris Public Power District, the threshold is $250,000. In a district with a gross revenue of $500 million or more, such as NPPD, the threshold is $500,000. LB 969 is amended into 1370. The threshold for a small district raised to $750,000, while the threshold for the large district would raise to $1.5 million. LB 969, as included in LB 1370, would better reflect current costs and needs of our public power districts. I would like your vote for AM 2863 to LB 1370. The committee voted to amend all bills into LB 1370 with an 8-0 vote, and LB 1370 was voted out of committee with a 7-0-1 not voting. I ask for a green vote on AM 2863 and LB 1370 for its advanced and select file, and I would ask those members who are here that have bills included in the amendment, if you would like to please speak now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Returning to the queue, Senator Bostar, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, colleagues. As was mentioned, I have one piece of legislation, LB 956, included in the committee amendment, AM 2863. LB 956 is legislation to replace continuously blinking aviation warning lights that are mounted on top of wind turbines with light mitigating technology systems approved by the Federal Aviation Administration. LB 956 requires that any new wind energy development or any existing wind development that undergoes a repower, which constitutes a substantial physical modification of at least 75% of the wind turbines in a wind energy conversion system, shall make an application to the Federal Aviation Administration for approval to install a light mitigating technology system. This light mitigating technology can detect nearby aircraft and allows for safe air travel in the area of wind turbines without the nuisance of continuous blinking lights. Aircraft detection lighting systems, sometimes referred to as aviation detection lighting systems, are radar-based systems that prevent wind turbine lights from turning on unless an aircraft is approaching or descending toward a wind development. With ADLS, the Federal Aviation Administration requires lighting to be activated and flashing if an aircraft is at or below 1,000 feet above the tallest wind turbine and is approaching a 3-mile perimeter around the facility. This legislation goes on to clarify that all costs associated with installing light mitigating technology systems will be incurred by the owner of the project and will not fall to taxpayers. We've also taken steps to make it clear that nothing in this regulation will be carried out in a manner that conflicts with the federal law or requirements of the Federal Aviation Administration, the United States Department of Defense. This legislation is similar to legislation already passed in Wyoming, North Dakota, and Kansas. This legislation was amended by the committee with AM 2613 as amended. A developer, owner, or operator of any wind energy conversion system that has 5 years or fewer remaining on its power purchase agreement is exempt from having to apply to the FAA for light mitigating technology installation until a power purchase agreement is extended, renewed, or newly executed. Light mitigating technology systems are a ready alternative to keep air travel safe and keep nuisance to a minimum. This legislation was brought forward with the intent to lessen the impact of wind development on neighboring communities, and I thank you for your time and consideration, and I would encourage your support of these provisions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hardin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of AM 2863 as well as the underlying Bill 1370. The Sentinel project is a $1 trillion project. You may read in places like Bloomberg that it's a $117 billion project that is running over in its costs as well as in time. The fact is that when you speak with military members, they will assure you that this is not a $117 billion project. In fact, they'll pat you on the head when you say that, and they'll tell you that this is the most expensive thing that has ever happened in the history of the United States. The most expensive thing before this project, and this is the replacing of the ICBMs in the Minuteman III system with the Sentinel system, was the building of Glenwood Canyon, I-70 in western Colorado, that basically placed 4 lanes of interstate, a railroad through an 18-mile long canyon with a river in the bottom of it. This is more expensive than that. And so a project like that one is going to attract all kinds of attention, a lot of it negative. Why? Well, because frankly, those are the biggest guns in the world. And just like the Minuteman III system, they're aimed at specific enemies. We'll get to more of that in just a moment. The Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the Office of Special Investigations of the Department of Defense have all been paying particular attention to these things going on in District 48. That's my district. What is their concern? 2 basic things: espionage and sabotage of that system. How is espionage done in the 21st century? Well, 3 ingredients: massive amounts of electricity, large computers that use that electricity, and physical proximity to what's being spied upon. Why not put a big building full of powerful computers for spying on the other side of the world? In a nutshell, milliseconds. Milliseconds are a wilderness of opportunity in the 21st century. Wind and solar projects have popped up all over District 48, proposed projects. Well, that's the first of those 3 ingredients to baking a spy cake today. And so the equipment that's used inside of a wind or solar project becomes very important, because those big guns are in part aimed at the people who are providing us the hardware. They don't like to have those big guns aimed at them, and before you attempt to virtue signal on that one, do keep in mind that their big guns are aimed at us. It's national defense that we're talking about. And so I can say that inside this bill is a caution about using Chinese-made hardware inside of solar and wind projects. It's not theoretical, it's actual. And the threats will continue for probably a decade and a half, or however long it takes to rebuild this missile field that started out with JFK era technology, was built during the Nixon administration, and now we're going to replace it with the latest and the greatest. So inside of AM 2863, you'll see references, and those references have to do with where does the equipment come from that is used in these sensitive areas. That's why this is so important. I would remind you that just a year ago, This body tossed Huawei out on its ear. A particular wireless carrier was using Huawei equipment, and they didn't get to have any of the money from ARPA because they had ignored for 5 years the warnings pertaining to using Chinese equipment in sensitive areas. I would caution and say, why on earth would we invite Chinese-made hardware back into the sensitive area where we disallowed Chinese equipment 12 months ago? What this says in 2863 is that NERC can essentially say, as long as we approve it, it can go in. So we do need both this amendment and this bill. Thank you, Senator Bosselman. Thank you.
Senator Vargas, you're recognized to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I had a few questions for Senator Bostelman, if you'll yield.
Senator Bosselman, will you yield?
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing this bill. In particular, one of the parts that I had questions about as a former school board member and as somebody that likes transparency, line of sight, I was curious about the hearing process here in the amendment. If a public power district, public power, and so on, is deciding that an entity should be closed or decommissioned, and there's obviously an allowable use, that there's going to be a hearing on the matter. It may be set time and place by the board at its discretion, but this says any such hearing shall be closed to the public. Given that this deals with public power and other public entities, why is this closed to the public? Shouldn't this be open to the public to have line of sight, especially since the decision isn't being made necessarily to disclose? Usually we close down the public meetings to the private when we're discussing HR, individuals. Why not have this be a public meeting?
Yeah, good question. There's a couple of reasons. I think one is this is a decision-making process of that public power utility, that entity itself. That whole decision process is private anyway. So when they're talking about, they're deciding it, whether they're going to close or not, it's private, and it's already private. So there may be some proprietary information discussed or otherwise. So the hearing is private. It's what they're already doing, and they haven't made a final decision. They haven't made a decision whether they're closed or not. But it's to make sure that they have a discussion with the Power Review Board to understand why they're going to shut down this facility, potentially shut down this facility, and then they make recommendations. It's prior to a decision on that. But if you think of it another way, is if I'm thinking that I'm going to close down this power plant 5 years from now, 15 years from now, and I make that public announcement that I'm thinking about it, what are the employees going to do? Probably they're going to leave, and we don't want that to happen. We want to make sure those utilities have that opportunity to stay functioning and working, so we have that generation. So really this just puts it into the process in a sense of what they're already doing, and giving the Power Review Board that opportunity to review it, because they're the ones that they'll look across the state as to what's generation as well as into the SPP. So it gives them, the Power Review Board, that opportunity to make a response to them before a final decision is made. Once that final decision is made by the utility, then it's announced, it's public.
I appreciate the answer to the question. I think the concern I have and the issue is, in the scenario you described, look, we have public hearings right now where we are not increasing funding for different agencies. That will mean cuts to some different entities if we're not funding them correctly. So, but we have transparency. We have the ability for the public to come in and testify. Employees have the opportunity, or representatives of employees have the opportunity to testify. In what matter does the public or employees or entities have the ability to weigh in on such big decisions if it's not public?
Do they have the current opportunity to weigh in and have that with their board already?
That's what I'm asking right now. We're saying that.
What my question is, I'm sorry, if the utility itself, the entity itself is making a decision, a management decision on looking at whether they're going to close a facility or not, they don't let people come in and testify on that or talk on that, I don't believe, at this point. So this is a third-party review in a sense of should that facility be closed or not, and a recommendation on that, and then at some point time later, when it's announced, then it all becomes public. So no, I don't. I think that the challenge is if you're looking at something 5 or 10 years out and you say we're looking at closing it 5 or 10 years from now, then the people leave. I mean, the idea is to make sure that we have a dispatchable facility that's there, that's needed, and we keep those employees there, and that's part of what the Power Review Board can provide back to the utility or the entity at the time.
I'm still concerned, and I'm looking at Erdman, because I imagine if like Game & Parks, although he'd probably be okay with this, decided to close something and there wasn't a public hearing associated with it and the public could weigh in, I'll get in again.
Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to be brief here. I'm just going to speak to my bill, LB 1260, which was amended into 2863. This bill really deals with public power and irrigation districts. There are 3 public power and irrigation districts in Nebraska: Central Public Power and Irrigation District, Middle Loop Public Power and Irrigation District, and North Loop River Public Power and Irrigation District. These were all created under Chapter 70 of the statutes. It's important to note that 1260, fundamentally what it does is it allows board members who have been elected to serve on those boards to vote on master contracts. So for example, if they're going to vote on irrigation rates for the entire district, currently they are, if you are an irrigation user who's voting on, you can't be involved in voting on setting the pricing for everyone as a single, this is what everybody pays. The problem with that is that your expertise is important to do this. You're not voting on your own personal contract, that's exempted, or that's accepted out of this bill, but you're voting on a broad contract. So we have worked with Accountability Disclosure on drafting the bill through their guidance so that we have language that works for these master agreements, so to speak. This also is impacted, and you look at these public power and irrigation districts, not only do they have irrigation users, they typically also are dealing with lakes with lots around them. So if you happen to be leasing a lot with a home there, you can also set the overall cost of lots or lease rates for those lots. Even if you live there, again, you're not setting your individual rate, you're setting it for everyone. In my case, I'm looking at, there are currently Central, as an example, Central Public Power and Irrigation District currently has 12 board members. This past year, only 6 of the 12 were allowed to vote and discuss the yearly water rates for the district, as 6 were irrigation customers. So this is a problem that needs to be fixed. Accountability Disclosure has been involved in the process. This just cleans up a problem that needs to be done. It's part of the bill. I would encourage you to again vote yes on AM 2863 and the underlying bill LB 1370. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon. I listened to what Senator Hardin had to say. Senator Hardin explained very thoroughly and appropriately the issues that we're dealing with in the western part of the state. I know of no one who's been more involved in this issue than Senator Hardin. And when Senator Hardin speaks about this, we should listen. I've been involved somewhat with him in some of the discussions that he's had. This is a very serious, what he was telling you is very serious. And consequently, if you don't live in that region, if you're not personally affected by those calls that people give you or call you about, you don't understand the reality of what's happening. We are under siege there by many adversaries, and none of them are our friends. And it doesn't make any sense to me that we would give any opportunity for those who don't care for us, those who hate us, to have them access anything that would remotely look like they have information that they shouldn't have. So we're going to have later on, there will be a bill also to create EV, electric vehicle charging stations. Those also need to be restricted from using Chinese equipment or foreign equipment from governments that don't like us. This is an issue that we have to deal with broadly and distinctly and quickly, because these are not the only people that are going to charge into our districts or area to try to do things. There'll be many more. This is just the first flush. One of the things that does concern me, though, is this. Some of these folks are out in the open where we can see them. They're very open and transparent about what they're trying to do. What concerns me is the things that we do not know about. And so we need not give any type of information away by having some kind of foreign equipment next to any of these sensitive places, so that we can be assured that our national security is guarded and protected. Senator Hardin, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you've made us aware of the issues that are very significant, not only for Nebraska, but for the whole United States and the free world. So thank you very much, and I appreciate his comments and ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Senator Vargas, you are recognized to speak.
Yes. I'm still trying to, look, I'm going to support the underlying bill. Hopefully I can work with Senator Bostman to get a better understanding, or if there's language changes we need to do, because I see this as permissive, right? Like there's language in here that it's at the discretion of the board. It's not required, right? So if it's at the discretion to have a hearing, they don't even have to actually have a hearing. They can determine in writing if they make a decision. But I'm still hung up on this idea that we're somehow protecting employees by not having a public hearing in regards to any type of decommissioning or closing of a facility. And regardless of the content, I guess we're not talking about an employee. I don't understand why we wouldn't make a hearing public. And that is the only hang up I have, just because that's what we do here. You know, we provide an opportunity, unless I'm missing that there's not another opportunity for the public to weigh in. I understand we have like executive sessions, we make decisions, but if there isn't an opportunity for the public to weigh in on something like we currently have with every single bill, I'm confused as why we wouldn't at least have a hearing on it. And I, again, wondered if Senator Bosman can yield to a few follow-up questions on this.
Senator Bosman, will you yield?
Yes.
So again, I support a lot of the intent, obviously the other work. Appreciate all the work that you've done. Again, my hang-up is just on how we treat ourselves. We make executive decisions and usually do that in executive session. But we do have a public hearing so the public can weigh in on big decisions. And it sounds like, unless I'm reading this wrong, there isn't a separate public component outside of the actual decision-making. And would you be amenable to working on language that provides the public with the ability to weigh in on the subject matter of decommissioning or closing a facility?
We can discuss it. I think I've talked to maybe Senator John Kavanaugh about an amendment, what that might look like. Another thing to remember is I don't know that the general public or an employee of that utility or that entity would have standing in that hearing, because the hearing specifically is on the technical aspects of the decommissioning and how that relates within the power grid and generation within the state. I'm not certain that they would have standing even if it was open to the public to come testify. And currently, like I said, there's proprietary information that's there that the utility or the entity want to make sure it keeps proprietary, keeps out of the public eye. And the other is if they would have standing or not. I'm not really sure that the public would have standing. to make sure that, again, that the utility or the entity is looking specifically at the generation, what the generation is, what the need is, and not looking at other aspects of that. So it'd be more of a technical side of it that I think the management would have and then the Power Review Board has that knowledge from SPP and the entire grid and how that fits together.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm happy to hear that there's at least an amendment or conversations with Senator John Kavanaugh. Again, the reason I'm bringing this up and what I'm hearing is that you don't even think they might have standing. We passed this language as is, and again, supporting it through general, working on select. They definitely would not have any standing. Nobody in the public would be able to attend this hearing. And the issue I have is the subject matter, right? Like, I trust that individuals that are concerned about their proprietary information wouldn't disclose it if that meeting is open to the public. But what I'm concerned about is excluding the public from things that the public may or may not deem necessary. It's just accountability, it's transparency, and it's how we treat ourselves. It's how most boards, public boards and public entities treat themselves. And I want to make sure we're just consistent. Again, all the rest of the stuff that we're working on in this and the overlying intent, I think it's good. Appreciate the committee. Echo a lot of what Senator Erdman's words about Senator Hardin's work and expertise on this, on the other things in terms of foreign national affairs and national security. But I just want to make sure that we're being consistent. And maybe it is that there's a separate hearing that is for final decision-making like we do, but there is a public hearing on the subject matter so that the public can still weigh in, whatever. If the subject matter is on closing what you put in here, either in excess of 100 megawatts owned by.
Senator.
Thank you very much.
And you are recognized, Senator Vargas.
Thank you. In excess of 100 megawatts owned by any such entity should be closed or decommissioned. That decision, the public would be able to weigh in, public entities would be able to weigh in, staff, I guess, entities that represent the public, workers would definitely be able to weigh in too. There are organized union workers and that are working in facilities, that they should be able to have line of sight and transparency when these decisions are being made, and actually weigh in on whether or not it should or should not be closed. I think that process should still be there, and I support whatever amendment would be worked on to be able to do that. So colleagues, I just want to make sure this is not against the bill, definitely not a filibuster. It is in the record, making sure we're really clear. We treat public meetings, when we're discussing things that concern the public, with public either infrastructure or buildings, and contracts that have to do with public entities, we want to make sure the public can engage and can weigh in. And I appreciate Senator Bossman answering questions. Also appreciate any of the work that the committee has done and will do between General Select and trust that there's something that will be done, maybe 2 different hearings. I don't know, but there should be some solution to this for accountability and transparency. Thank you.
Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Bossman, you're welcome to close on 2863.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask for a green vote on AM 2863. All these amendments into these bills were all unanimous votes in committee, 8-0. So I'd ask for your support in AM 2863. Thank you.
Question before the body is the adoption of AM 2863. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Has everyone voted who wishes to vote? Mr. Clerk, please record.
29 ayes, no nays on the adoption of committee amendments.
AM 2863 is adopted. Senator Bosselman, you're welcome to close on LB 1370. Senator Bosselman waives close. Question before the body is the advancement of LB 1370 to E&R initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
29 ayes, no nays on the motion to advance the bill, Mr. President.
LB 1370 does advance. Next item, announcement, Mr. Clerk.
An announcement, Mr. President, the Revenue Committee will hold an executive session in room 2022 at 1:00 p.m. That's all I have at this time.
Next item on the agenda, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, next item on the agenda.
Legislative Bill 1017, offered by Senator Boston, is a bill for an act relating to workers' compensation. Amend Section 48-121, change the schedule of compensation for loss or loss of use in more than one specific part of the body from injury or illness resulting in disabilities prescribed, and repeal the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 5th of this year. It was referred to the Business and Labor Committee. That committee placed the bill in general file with committee amendments.
Senator Boston, you're welcome to open on 1017.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 1017 was introduced on behalf of the Nebraskans for workers' compensation, equity, and fairness. This bill is designed to clarify the provisions of Nebraska Revised Statute, Chapter 48-121, relating to the circumstances under which the Workers' Compensation Court can award benefits based upon loss of earning capacity in cases in which a loss or loss of use of more than one hand, arm, foot, leg, or any combination thereof has resulted from the same accident or illness. We call this the head, shoulders, knees, and toes bill. Under the bill, the loss or loss of use of multiple parts, including foot and toes, resulting from the same accident or illness would not entitle the employee to compensation for loss of earning capacity. In addition, LB 1017 would clarify that, quote, loss of use for purposes of loss of earning capacity determination means permanent loss of function. So to back up a little bit, in 2007, the legislature adopted the workers' compensation reform in Legislative Bill 588. In 2007, the primary component of that legislation revised the manner in which large hospitals were reimbursed in connection with workers' compensation claims, thereby reducing employer expenses. In addition, the legislation revised the manner in which benefits could be determined in cases in which an employee suffered injuries to more than one hand, more than one arm, foot, leg, or any combination thereof. That is the issue that is addressed in the bill before you today. With the passage of Legislative Bill 588, a substantial change in policy was adopted which benefited injured workers. The rationale for the change was that when more than one hand, arm, foot, or leg was injured and limited the employee, the impact of the injuries may be far greater than recognized by the schedule of benefits for injuries to any individual member. In such instances, the employee should be entitled to receive more benefits than the schedule allows. Conversely, if only one hand, arm, foot, or leg is injured, then the justification to compensate the employee based on a loss of earning capacity rather than a statutory benefits for the schedule member. Since the passage of Legislative Bill 588 in 2007, a number of court decisions have been rendered which run counter to the original intent in LB 588 with respect to the loss of earning capacity issue, most recently culminating with the Nebraska Supreme Court decision in the case of Espinoza versus Job Source USA. In conclusion, LB 1017 is designed to address adverse impacts resulting from two separate decisions of the Nebraska Supreme Court. First, it defines loss or loss of use to mean permanent loss of physical function, to clarify that permanent restrictions of each hand, arm, foot, or leg, or any combination thereof, has to exist for that earning capacity determination to apply. This bill would also address the decision in Rogers versus Nebraska State Fair, where the Nebraska Supreme Court held that it was not necessary for an injured employee to sustain functional loss in the form of permanent physical restrictions to more than one scheduled member in order to receive benefits based on the loss of earning capacity. Secondly, this bill addresses the Espinoza decision, which held that injuries to multiple parts of a single member were eligible for benefits based upon a loss of earning capacity determination. LB 1017 will require injuries to two separate or distinct extremities or limbs for the loss of earning capacity determination application, thereby returning the state of the law to what was originally intended by the legislature in the passage of LB 588 in 2007. I will also note there are amendments on file, one of which was filed by Senator McDonnell, which I believe he is planning to pull. We worked out a committee amendment that was a compromise amendment and removed the language regarding the Rogers versus State of Nebraska decision, and I believe Senator Reapy will be introducing that amendment. It's my understanding that Senator McDonnell supports that amendment as an alternative to the amendment he had previously filed. It's our belief that that addresses the concerns of the opposition that were held at the time of the hearing and now would eliminate that opposition. I would urge you to vote green on LB 1017 as well as the committee amendment. Thank you, Mr. President.
There is a committee amendment. Senator Reapy, you are welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Business and Labor Committee held a hearing on LB 1017 and designated it as a committee priority on February 12th. Although seen as a workers' compensation cleanup bill, clarifying ambiguous statutory language and solidifying an agreement between the Nebraska Association of Trial Attorneys and the business community was given there was a opposition to this bill. The committee voted to adopt AM 2683 to LB 1017, an amendment which addressed the trial attorney's only issue with this particular bill. AM 2683 strikes language defining loss of use, which would have overridden Rogers versus Nebraska State Fair, a Nebraska Supreme Court decision. As a result, the Nebraska Association of Trial Attorneys are no longer opposed to this bill. As amended by AM 2683, LB 1017 will overturn the recent Nebraska Supreme Court Espinoza decision and return the law to that which was intended when originally enacted. I encourage your green vote on AM 2683 as well as LB 1017. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Clerk, for an amendment.
Mr. President, Senator McDonald, I have AM 2769 with a note he wishes to withdraw.
No objection, so ordered.
I have nothing further at this time, Mr. President.
See no one in the queue. Senator Reapy, you're welcome to close on 2683. Senator Reapy waives close. Question before the body is the adoption of AM 2683. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
26 ayes, no nays on adoption of the committee amendment, Mr. President.
AM 2683 is adopted. Senator Boson, you are welcome to close on LB 1017. Senator Boson waives close. Question before the body is the advancement of LB 1017 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Has everyone voted who wishes to vote? Mr. Clerk, please record.
29 ayes, 1 nay, Mr. President, on the advancement of the bill.
LB 1017 does advance. Mr. Clerk, next item.
Mr. President, General File Legislative Bill 253, introduced by Senator Brewer. It's a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Law Enforcement Training Center. Provides for another location for the center, provides for administrators, harmonizes provisions, and repeals the original section. Bill was read for the first time on January 10th of last year and referred to the Judiciary Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file. There are committee amendments as well as additional amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Brewer, you are welcome to open on LB 253.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, take everything that Brandon told you and forget it. What we have done is we have taken LB 253 and because of the statute it fit in, modified it so that we could have a veterans court. The idea came to us from the former Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel. He took the time to come here and testify in the hearing. And after he was done, we realized that this was an opportunity for us to do something that needed to be done. And so with that, I want to start to kind of share with you. I've had a number of people come up to me and question the need or whether this is something that veterans are worthy of. And I will share a little of my own personal experience. When I found out I was going to war for the first time, I always figured that it would be with the infantry, and that it would be a group of Army Rangers or Special Forces. But the reality of it is that you end up with a mixed match of folks that come from all walks of life and all skill sets. And I'll share just a quick story. In the fall of 2011, at an inland depot outside of Kandahar, Afghanistan, we were inspecting vehicles that were coming out of Pakistan. And it was the end of the day, and we were coming back to consolidate and do a convoy. And in a flash of light, about a third of the platoon was gone. A 12-year-old had come through the gate and came into the area where we were at. He had a suicide vest on, and he detonated the vest. I was fortunate in I was on the backside of an up-armor Humvee when that happened. But unfortunately for those that were near where it happened, in an instant, we had a number of casualties. And what was surprising about those casualties is some were Navy, some were Air Force, many Army. But when you raise your hand and take the oath, there's no way to know where you're going to be or what you're going to do. Doesn't matter the service. So as we look at veterans and we try and make a decision about whether or not this is something we should do, just remember that that decision changed the lives of all of those individuals there. For the 5 that died, obviously, it changed it for their families. But what we're going to ask of you here is to take special consideration for the veterans. So I'm going to go ahead and read through the part of the bill that will help you to better understand what we're about to do. So what we're trying to do with what will be AM 2668 is that when a veteran is accused of a crime, I think the court system should hold them accountable. I want to stress that. I do not think that being a veteran should be a permit to commit crimes, but I think we need to make sure that the system works to address those issues that are specific to that veteran's service. We will know if the system works if we do not see the folks that are participating or part of the program returning to the courthouse. That ultimately is what we're hoping to see out of this. We've had a couple of decades of history with problem-solving courts here in Nebraska. I think we should build on that. So let me get into a little more details of this amendment. AM 2668 would create a veterans justice program in each of the jurisdictions across Nebraska. It would tell the courts that when a veteran should be eligible for a veteran program. Let me be clear though, if the judge thinks that putting a particular veteran in a program would be unsafe to the public, this legislation lets the judge make the call. But these programs are not supposed to be a cakewalk. There would be a very detailed case plan for each of the cases. The plan would be developed by the court with input from the probation and other experts. The case plan would contain specific supervision and treatment goals. The case plan would include the rules that the veteran has to follow to successfully complete the program. If the veteran successfully completes these objectives, at the end of the procedure, the case would be dismissed. If the veteran does not follow the plan successfully, the court would go and be in a position to find him guilty and sentence him. There is no free ride with this bill. The bill also recognizes that in cases where there's a victim, the victim's rights are to be heard by the court during this process. In any case where a veteran is convicted of a crime, the bill would tell the judge to consider a veteran's service as a factor when it comes to sentencing. Individuals, and these are the categories that they would look at, individual awards or merits of service. So that would be like if they had received a Purple Heart or a Bronze Star. They would also look at overseas deployments. These would be the non-combat deployments, such as Poland or Romania. Exposure to danger. This would be combat deployments, places like Iraq and Syria. And service-connected disabilities. So this would run the whole gamut from post-traumatic stress to traumatic brain injury to the actual loss of limbs. This amendment would also direct the state court administrator to keep track of some things. Participation in these programs, including the success rate, housing and employment status of these veterans, and further details on the types of offenses. The state court administrator would file an annual report that would be given to the Judiciary Committee, including all this data. Now what I'd like to do is share a little of why I think you see cases where veterans need to have an extra look at their situation. After I was wounded in 2011, I came back and went through about 2 years of surgeries. The VA has the ability to give you a lot of meds during any period that you have surgeries. So I had 21 surgeries over that period, and it's easy to get into a position where those meds become your life, or the transition from the military to the civilian world leaves you in a position where you want to crawl into a bottle or change your life in a very negative way. So sometimes it's that experience in life that sets a course for you beyond the military that unfortunately causes some to fall off the rails and they have challenges. What we're trying to do with this Veterans Court is to give them a chance to still have a life, even though they may have stumbled after they've left service. So I would ask for your support on LB 53, which will become the amendment that I will be followed by Senator Wayne on. Thank you, Mr. President.
As mentioned, there are committee amendments. There is a committee amendment, AM 2978. Senator Brewer, you are welcome. Senator Wayne, you are welcome to open.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I'm going to talk about why first this bill is important to me, and then I'm going to talk about what the bill does. And I'm also first in the queue, so just I don't have to stop, so that's intentional. It's no secret Senator Brewer and I are friends, but what is probably not known to a lot of people is a conversation. I won't reveal the whole conversation, but I'll tell you the topic. In February of 2019, Senator Slama had a bill about social studies, and Brewer did not know I was going to say this, so he'll be mad here in a little bit. But a colleague of ours was talking to Senator Groney at the time, talking about respect, and that colleague of ours got up and said, "I don't respect that rag," and was pointing to the flag up there. And later on another bill, Senator Brewer responded, and he responded in a way that made me struggle. He said, "It rips our heart out to hear someone say that they refer to this flag as a rag, because those of us that have brought home, and we have lost many of those, and it's hard to refer to as a flag as a rag because you have to fold it and give it to the parents, and that is awfully hard to do." The reason why that touched me is because I can never understand how someone who has a similar history as far as cultural of how this country treated their people so negatively. And finally, I had the courage to ask Brewer about how does he do it? Because as an African American, I come in here sometimes angry that this country owes a debt to us. but Brewer has always took it a different way. And we had some confidential conversations about how he approaches it. And I thought, at a minimum, I should figure out how to help him and people like him. And so that's how the conversation started on the mountain about PTSD, and that's how the conversation started about Fort Robinson. And when Secretary Hagel approached us with this idea, I literally set it for a 7-day hearing. We did an amendment because of our confidential conversations around what it's like to go through a war zone and what it's like to come back at the same time, give so much to a country that took so much from its people. So this is personal in the sense of, this is my homage to him for inspiring me to continue to fight. So I want to start by just saying, here's what this bill does. But I wanted you to understand the background, that what I gather from our conversations is it's easy to support a veteran on Veterans Day. It's easy on Memorial Day to say we support those who serve our country. What's hard is when they make a mistake that is directly tied to what we put them through. It's easy to support when it's convenient. It is hard to support when they make a mistake when they come home for what they're struggling with to make sure we're okay. And so we probably won't get through this bill, and maybe we will, and there's going to be some tough conversations. But this bill is about an individualized approach to individuals who have served this country and came back and are having some mental health issues that we can resolve or try to resolve and surprise and give supports, oftentimes in which this country has failed to support them. So what this bill tries to do is says the Veterans Justice Act in Nebraska, it came out of Committee 6-2, but there's two main parts. And the first one is the Veteran Justice Program. This already occurs in Douglas County, Lancaster County, but where it doesn't really happen right now is in rural Nebraska, where veterans don't have the same opportunity to participate in problem-solving courts because those local county attorneys have decided to do it. Many times in rural Nebraska, we can't even get county attorneys. We often contract with other counties. So this bill is trying to give tools for a judge to find the totality of everything that happened in this individual's life and give them a chance. It doesn't change their sentence in this regard. It takes probation if they're eligible and puts it on the front end. And if they complete everything, what that means is a case plan. What that means is making sure they're going to treatment. What that means is doing everything right through that probation. Then they get an award at the end, a reward at the end of their record being clean from that charge. But if they don't, if they fail, if they make more mistakes, they get sentenced at the end of this. So this isn't a get out of jail free, but we are paying respect to those in this particular class who have seen some of the worst things and are coming back home to struggle with it. So this program operates similar to a deferred judgment that was passed here. What deferred judgment is what I just described of putting probation on the front end with an reward afterwards. We expanded a little bit. And what you'll hear is this is a bad bill because it involves domestic violence or DUIs. I want you just to imagine, how do our veterans interact with our criminal justice system when they come back? They often self-medicate, which involves drugs and typically getting in the car. That's where DUIs come in. And they become violent. As Secretary Hagel said, we have trained them in that capacity. And many of them are serving the longest tours that they've ever served because we've had the longest war going on that we've ever had. Many of them are serving 5 to 6 tours, which was unheard of. And when they come back, the least we can do is provide them with the opportunity to get some help, and our criminal justice system can solve that problem. This gives flexibility to the court to look at the mental health condition as it relates to their military service and the psychological effects of their deployment and the conditions that contribute to the criminal offense that they are charged with. Again, I am not getting into the underlining bills of our laws of what is eligible for parole and what is not. I wish I could, but we have a complete task force with the Attorney General, LB 50 task force, that Senator Bosan's on, and actually her subcommittee is going through pretty much almost all the laws and trying to figure out what things can be better, what things we need to change, and what things we can keep the same. So I'm not having that debate. But if they're currently eligible for probation and they are a veteran, they are currently eligible if this bill passed for Veterans Court. That doesn't mean that they automatically get to participate. There are factors that have to be considered. And some of those are going to be an additional amendment from here to select file that we are working on with the advocacy groups that we are working on. I just got one about, which I consider not true, but I'm willing to adopt this other statute regarding masking, even though we don't mask. We'll put more clarity into that. I'm okay with all of that. And we're going to have a meeting Monday or Tuesday with a group of people. We're working that out literally by text message right now. So part of it is, if they get in this program, they're going to have to develop a case plan. They're going to have to work with the Veterans Affairs. They're going to have to get help. And I want to put this in perspective. If someone gets charged with a DUI, if someone gets a domestic violence, that's what I keep hearing floating around. Both of those are misdemeanors. What does a misdemeanor mean? The most you can be sentenced to is up to 1 year. If you add good time into that factor,
1 minute,
the most that person is going to sit in jail is for 6 months. And you tell me how many county jails in rural Nebraska have the programming that is needed to help that individual? Hardly any. This allows a judge to make sure a program is in place for this individual, that they're not sitting in jail for 30 days and go back home and do the same thing, that somebody is actually watching and helping them for a year to a year and a half. That's typically how long these programs last. Instead of just saying, you got a DUI, 5 days in jail, 10 days in jail, we'll give you another 10 days of house arrest, you're good. We never deal with the underlying issues, and this is a bill that will deal with the underlying issues. If you haven't read Senator Brewer's book, you need to read it. When you start understanding
Senator. Colleagues, we have several guests with us today. I'd like to introduce them now. Senator Merman would like to recognize 25 12th grade students and 2 teachers from Southwest High School in Bartley, and they are in the north balcony. Please rise and be welcomed by your legislature. Senator Hansen also has guests. Leadership Washington County, 16 members of that group from Washington County, and they are also located in the north balcony. Please rise and be recognized by your legislature. In the south balcony, we have 80 fourth grade students from Aurora, and Senator Linehan's grandson is also in the group. Welcome. Please rise and be recognized by your legislature. In addition to Luke, her grandson, Senator Linehan, would also like to welcome Alexis, her daughter-in-law from Aurora, and she is located under the south balcony. Please rise and be welcomed. Senator Wayne, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you. So, colleagues, there's a lot of noise going around the room, and I want to give, or in the lobby, and I want to give just a little perspective. I found out about some of these issues during committee hearing. Really, I found out most of the issues this morning. That is why we are going to meet on Monday at noon, and then again on Tuesday I'm blocking out to fix whatever the issues now are. And we've pretty much agreed to a lot of them. The one thing that we are going to disagree, and I'm just being transparent, is the DUIs and DVs. I think we cannot just put people in jail for less than a year, which is actually 6 months or less, and not provide people the services that are needed to make sure we're dealing with the underlying issue. And my staff reminded me this is not a veteran court, this is a veteran program. There are veteran courts that are already established in Sarpy, Douglas County, Lancaster. We are creating more of a veteran program for everybody else. So an individual judge who doesn't have access to this in Douglas County can say, hey, this is a candidate. I think this person, because of their military services, meeting all these findings about their veteran status and creating some mitigating factors, here is another tool in the toolbox that this judge can do. So I would ask for a green vote on AM 2978. And additionally, I would ask for a green vote on LB 253. And I would like to get another opportunity on Monday and Tuesday to sit down with all the parties and figure it out. We've literally agreed to pretty much everything. I will tell you just a funny story. Last night I was told this was gonna be on the agenda. I said, oh bleep, can we put it last? Because we haven't finished putting all the amendments together that now I'm asking you to wait till select on, because we're working with the advocacy group, but we just haven't got it done yet. So I like the surprise of it being on the next day. And I would ask for a green vote, and so we can move this forward and move this bill forward. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Brewer, for being the inspiration of this bill.
Mr. Clerk, for an announcement.
Mr. President, the Urban Affairs Committee will have an exec session at 1:40 under the North Balcony. Urban Affairs Committee, 1:40 under the North Balcony exec session. Additionally, Mr. President, as it concerns Legislative Bill 253, Senator Lowe would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 3160.
Senator Lowe, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boy, do I feel like a can of Friskies in a cat fight right now. Nobody I respect more than Senator Brewer. And nobody I respect equally more than Senator Wayne. Two of my classmates. Colleagues, today I rise to introduce and ask you for your support on AM 3160. I'm offering this amendment as a way to move forward with the goals of establishing a statewide veteran service program, but in a manner that takes more measured and cautious approach. First of all, let me state I support our military and our veterans, and I owe my freedom to them. Let me also state why the Judiciary Committee should not be accepted and reported from committee. While I know it is very well intended, it unfortunately goes way too far. It is based on deferred judgments, which were established by this legislature in 2019 through LB 686. Under deferred judgment, after a defendant is found guilty, the defendant can request the court defer the entry of a judgment and goes to probation. That means they serve no jail time, and when they are done, the plea is withdrawn by the defendant and the action is dismissed without entry of judgment. I witnessed this along with Senator Holdcroft and Senator Ibaud just the other day with the DUI court here in Lincoln. The problem with the Judiciary Amendment is that it expands eligibility for deferred judgments beyond what is available today. The amendment requires that nearly all crimes by veterans, except for those not eligible for probation, shall be eligible, with a presumption for participation in a probation programs that only can be overcome with narrow judicial finding. This list of crimes includes first-degree sexual assault of a child, third offense DUI, crimes of violence against intimate partners, kidnapping, second-degree murder, and pandering of a child would all be presumably eligible for probation and no conviction, not even a plea to lesser offense. For the judicial finding, there will be no consideration of adjustments for victims, only public safety. It doesn't matter if a defendant is a habitual criminal
that is, this is his 10th DUI for someone, or that a person was killed in the commission of a crime, the presumption stands. With deferred judgment, there will be no record of conviction. The charge will be dismissed. There will be no record that can be used to prohibit firearm possession or enhance charges for future crimes. For these reasons, I have offered AM 3160. My amendment will still establish veteran justice programs statewide, but it would more carefully limit eligibility, and it would require the Supreme Court to do the rulemaking for the creation and operation of the veteran justice programs. With input from county attorneys, criminal defense attorneys, the legislature, and veterans, this will allow for a more thoughtful approach to what the programming should look like and what programs and supports need to be in place for these to be successful. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bosselman, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do support the amendments in the underlying bill as long as I understand that going to select file, we're going to have some discussions on how to appropriately build a program that's going to be sustainable and beneficial to all veterans that we have. I'm a veteran myself, 20 years, although I do not have the combat experience anywhere near what Senator Brewer does, and I respect that very much, and I respect all those who are there. I do have close friends and my close family friends that do or have had struggles that they've needed to overcome. I want to make sure that when we put something in statute, that we're going to do something that's going to be able to provide the services, provide the opportunities for those veterans that need that help. I don't believe that we need, I don't know that we have the resources or the facilities, the probation officers or the judges right now to be able to handle the workload that potentially could come their way. That's one of my main concerns, is that we make sure that the bill gets passed as a bill that will address concerns that our counties have, because there is an opportunity here to do a lot of good and a lot of help. We need to make sure we do it the right way. We need to make sure we've got the backstops in place. We need to make sure we got the people in place. We got the ability, the opportunity that we can put the best foot forward and we don't leave people out, because that's the worst thing we can do. So at this point, I do support the amendments. I do support the bill, but I do believe we need to make sure as we plan this, as we put this out, that we do have, we are going to be able to handle the workload. We are going to be able to take care of the veterans. We are going to meet the needs that are out there in the best way possible. And I'm not so sure we're at that point right now. I can see the benefits out of problem-solving courts. I can see the benefits out of drug courts and veterans courts. What I hear on a problem-solving courts is the amount of time, personnel, the judges, probation officer is significant, and we don't have enough. We want to do more. And in the veteran side, especially, we want to do more. I want to make sure as we go through this process that we're looking at all those things and that we have it done to the best of our ability so that we make sure we meet those needs that are out there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Blood, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everybody wants to stand up and say they support veterans, but I'm not going to say that. I support veterans. I support the underlying bill and the changes in the underlying bill because I trust Senator Brewer and I trust Senator Wayne to do the right thing and make sure that this happens in a way that is beneficial to the state of Nebraska. Because friends, our veterans are in crisis. There is nothing that we can do ever in this body that will ever compensate them for what they have done on our behalf. Nothing. You can do the ceremonies. You can do the meals. You can get on the mic and say how much you love our veterans. But none of that will change anything for those that are suffering right now and need our help. And so I do support this bill. I know that you're not all comfortable with how it's being done, but as the senators who are veterans in this room, and the senators who serve veterans as a state legislator, as I do, Senator Sanders does, because we have the largest group of veterans in the state in our area. We know that Nebraska and other states are in a crisis, and anything that we can do, especially if Chuck Hagel was here, because I don't know a stronger fighter for veterans in DC than he was, we can figure this out. And I'm not going to wait for somebody from the AG's office or somebody who's concerned with the circumstances to come and hand me something to read. Let's figure this out. Let's make this happen, because this is a good thing, friends. With that, I would yield back any time that I have to Senator Wayne.
Senator Wayne, 2 minutes, 50 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I want to be clear. I personally, as an attorney, don't think the masking issue that's going around about losing federal dollars is an issue, and I'll explain why. But then I'll tell you that it doesn't matter, because I still agree to the Minnesota statute on that particular one. The reason why I don't think it is because there's this, when you get in trouble with a, like say a DUI, there is a separate revocation process that is an administrative proceeding through the Department of Motor Vehicles. We don't touch that. So even if I have a client who is found not guilty of a DUI, their administrative proceeding already happened. You have 10 days from your arrest to file an appeal, and then you have a hearing. That's already done. And typically, I don't even waste time doing it, because they always find my clients guilty, and it's not even the same standard as a reasonable doubt. So I don't ever do it, but that's already done. So that doesn't change. And so I don't believe masking applies. And because I don't, I'm like, well, if you want the belts and suspenders, okay, we'll add those too. So we are going to add them a Minnesota statute. There is a concern regarding federal funding for prosecutions of DVs. I guess if we change the word from a shall to a may, it doesn't. I am working with Senator Boslin to research that to find out exactly. Not an issue. My whole point is I want to cast a broad net to get as many veterans eligible. Then the next step is to actually be able to participate. And those are the things where you would be eliminated if you couldn't meet these kind of things. Now, at the end, we added public safety exception, because we always wanted to be the judge to say at the end of the day, which they make these decisions every day. When you get a bond hearing, the first thing you get is an arraignment and a bond. They make the decision on whether you should go back out or not on a public safety concern. There's other factors, but that's one of them. I do agree with Senator Lowe that he pointed out about victims having the ability to have a victim's right. They should be able to talk to the prosecutor, and they should be able to either have a statement or something that they can lay out about treatment or jail time. So we can work that in. I agree with that. So I don't really feel like there's a whole lot of opposition as far as what I'm agreeing to, but I'll know after Monday. So I've already talked to the AG. We are planning on meeting Monday, I think at noon, and we'll figure that out. And hopefully by Wednesday, the speaker will reschedule it and we can move this forward. That's how happy I am. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne, and you are next in the queue.
About to punch out. Thank you. I was just about to punch out, but I really do appreciate all the concerns that are coming up. And for my colleagues, I don't want to lecture people who are a little bit less senior than me, but get used to the idea of the lobby and the constituents on the day that the bill comes out asking for changes. It's just the nature of being down here. Be flexible, be able to fly on your feet and change direction. You wish that they can give you stuff earlier, but just like everybody, we have lives. It happened the other day on Senator Holcroft's bill. I didn't even get a chance to look at it until the night of and then the morning of. And I give the same respect to the lobby. So that happens, and that's why we have 3 rounds. And I would ask for a green vote on AM 2978 and the underlying bill, and look forward to the amendment on select file. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bosson, you are recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the amendments. I want to start by thanking Senator Brewer for his service and the others in this room who have served our country, and those who may be watching and paying attention to how this is going. I have long been a supporter of problem-solving courts, including and certainly including veterans courts. I think that the intent here is good, and part of the difficulty with our legislature is we file bills at the beginning of session, and unless we can sort of massage them into a way that works with a filed bill in the first 10 days, we're stuck with what we've got. This bill was brought to the attention of the team of individuals that supported it at a late time, and so we're working as hard as we can to get to a place where everybody feels that we're providing for the respect that veterans deserve, the respect that victims deserve, and the public safety that all the rest of us deserve. And I think we're essentially there. It's a matter of getting things to and from bill drafting on time at this point. So I think it's worth saying that we've worked really, really hard on this. Certainly he's right. There's been amendments that, Senator Wayne is right, there's been amendments that have come at the last minute. I'm sure all of you are really, really, really sick of those coming out of the same committee. But judiciary does a lot of things that have a lot of moving parts, and we're making laws that are affecting everyone. With regards to the domestic violence and the DUI issues, I think it just requires some clarification that they are unique in that we receive that federal funding. And so this isn't someone trying to be difficult or think that those cases, a veteran shouldn't be able to participate in this program solely due to the fact that they were charged with a DUI or a domestic violence. And I don't say that to minimize those charges at all. But there's funding that's tied to those in a way that does require some careful consideration of how we word this. And in my conversations with Senator Brewer and Senator Wayne, they understand, or they've at least voiced to me, that we're all wanting the same thing, but we just have to make sure that we don't set ourselves up for problems based on how we word this in statute. So I do support the amendments. I think there's some work that's going to be done, and I look forward to having something that all of us can be proud of for all Nebraskans going forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Lowe, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you very much. Would Senator Wayne answer a question for me?
Senator Wayne, will you yield?
I have a mint in my mouth, but yes.
I'll give you a second.
No, you're fine. I'll just say yeah like this.
Senator Wayne, can a DUI not be a misdemeanor?
Yes.
Can it be a felony?
Yeah, it can be if it's second, third offense or aggravated. So yes, but not your first one under 0.08 or under 0.15.
Okay, thank you, Senator Wayne. Like I said, there's nobody I respect more than our veterans and those that serve with us here on the legislative floor. Thank you for your service, and as Senator Blood said, that's a pretty flippant thing to say to our veterans, because they did it and we did not. But it's all I got for them right now. It's just my thank you for what they did for our country. And I attended the hearing that Senator Chuck Hagel was at, and brought forth this. And at the time I thought this was great. This is something we need to do. But then facts started filling out, and so that's why I brought this amendment. And Senator Wayne, Senator Brewer, the District Attorneys Association or County Attorneys Association, and I and the Attorney General will work on this next week. And with that, I pull AM 3160.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, I have nothing further to the committee amendments.
Seeing no one in the queue, Senator Wayne, you're welcome to close on AM 2978.
Thank you, and I'm going to say this again. It has been an honor being in this body. It's been an honor with Senator Lowe at our last hearing. I said some words for him, but this was fast-tracked not because it's a bad bill. This was fast-tracked because it's working in other places, and you have to look no farther than our own veterans courts that we have established. What we don't have is the ability to do this everywhere else, and this bill gives this opportunity for outside of the big three to really engage in this and have another tool in the toolbox for a judge. And that's all we're trying to do here. We recognize the concerns. I'm not trying to change the underlying penalties. If you are eligible for probation, you're eligible for this if you're a veteran. We are going to put some strings around it. So I look forward to working with everyone on Monday to figure this out and get this done. So I'd ask for a green vote on AM 2978 and the underlining bill. And again, I just appreciate everybody who in the last 4 hours have been working on this and coming to consensus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Colleagues, the question before the body is the adoption of AM 2978. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
34 ayes, no nays on the adoption of committee amendments.
Mr. Clerk?
Senator Wayne, I had AM 2534 with the note you wish to withdraw.
Yes, I withdraw.
In that case, Mr. President, nothing further on the bill.
Colleagues, the question before the body is the advancement of LB 253 to ENR initial. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Mr. Clerk, please record.
38 ayes, no nays on the motion to advance the bill, Mr. President.
LB 253 is advanced to ENR initial. Mr. Clerk, for items, announcements.
Mr. President, I do have items. Your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 1412 as final reading, as well as 1413. Committee on Revenue reports Legislative Bill 1356 to general file with amendments. Motions to be printed from Senator Merman to LB 1092. Senator Walls, an amendment to 1329. New A bill 635A offered by Senator Albright is a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to carry out the provisions of Legislative Bill 635. Have notice of committee hearing from the Natural Resources Committee regarding certain gubernatorial appointments on April 2nd and April 3rd. The Executive Board gives notice of hearing on LR 335 for Thursday, March 28th. Name ads. Senator Dover to LB 71, Senator Vargas to 126, Senator John Kavanaugh to 840, Senator Vargas to 905, Senator Blood to 1023, Senator Dover to 1092 and 1096, Senator Vargas to 1284, Senator Blood to 1284, and finally priority motion, Senator Frederickson to move to adjourn until Monday, March 25th, 2024 at 10 o'clock a.m.
Colleagues, you've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Excuse me, just 1 minute here. Senator Aguilar for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a final reminder that tomorrow at noon is the deadline to submit interim study requests to the bill drafting in order to guarantee that your request will be ready for introduction on the 50th legislative day. Thank you, Mr. President.
You've heard the motion for adjournment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned. You've heard the motion for adjournment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. We are adjourned.